Yeah, we have 31 knots sustained wind, topside, gust of 40.
Splashed. Mark bearing and range.
We may well be looking at a true unknown.
We see an interest in our nuclear capabilities, and then we have this really bizarre, what I don't know if you call it an interest, but there seems to be a connection with water. And these things have a tendency to be seen in and around water, which kind of leads to one of the observables that we've had. There's 5 distinct observables that set this technology, as I mentioned earlier, aside from everything we have in our inventory. The first is hypersonic velocity, the ability to change directions instantly. And when I say instantly, I mean human beings can withstand about 9 G forces. Some of our best aircraft can withstand about 16 Gs. These things are doing 300, 400, 600 Gs in mid-flight. Then there's hypersonic velocity. That is speeds that by definition are Mach 5 or above. Very, very fast. We do have some technology. You mentioned Russian hypersonics and things like that. You know, there are technologies that can go that fast, but then again, you don't expect a hypersonic aircraft to do a 90-degree turn. To put that into context, our SR-71 Blackbird, when at 3,200 miles an hour, wants to take a right-hand turn. It takes roughly half the state of Ohio to do it. You don't expect it to just kind of do this. And that's precisely what we're seeing. And then the third observable is a bit like cloaking. We call it low observability. But the fourth observable is what we were talking about, and that's transmedium travel and water. The ability for an object to fly not only in our atmosphere, low and high altitudes, but also potentially in a vacuum environment like space and even underwater.
July 2009. The Russian government declassifies top-secret documents detailing USO encounters with the Russian Navy. Stunning first-hand accounts of extraterrestrial encounters shock the Russian people and ignite interest from the world's UFO research community. But how could such compelling accounts have been kept secret for so long? And why?
The problem that we had in the Soviet era, prior to 1992, you're dealing with fundamentally a totalitarian system in which UFOs and USOs were not to be talked about. So there was a lot of secrecy. And with the end of the Soviet Union and the release of some of those files that we now have had access to, one of them concerns an undated account of a Russian submarine in the South Pacific.
A Russian nuclear sub encountered a formation of what appeared to be alien spacecraft at depth under the water.
At a depth of approximately 260 meters, crew aboard a fully weaponized Russian nuclear submarine detect 6 unknown objects on their sonar, traveling in formation directly towards them. What's even more alarming is the speed at which the objects are traveling, in excess of 265 miles per hour.
This was hugely unnerving for these highly trained military personnel, and it was quite unlike anything they'd ever seen or experienced before.
6 disc-shaped objects traveling in formation continue on their trajectory, gaining speed as they head directly towards the submarine.
They were going at incredible speeds, but then when the submarine became alarmed at what was happening with these objects and slowed down its speed, the objects did exactly the same thing, mirroring what the submarine was doing.
The Russian crew are at first stunned by what they're witnessing, then quickly man their battle stations.
The captain, fearing that a collision was imminent and that he was under attack, ordered an emergency surfacing of the submarine.
The submarine finally breaches the surface, narrowly avoiding a collision. But what happens next is even more astonishing.
So here's the Soviet submarine commander dealing with this terrifying situation. They then saw through the periscope these 6 objects come out of the water and take off at some absurdly fast speed.
One can only speculate about the intent of these USOs. Was this a hostile act of some sort, or were they just fleeing detection? We don't know.
Researchers believe what the Russians encountered was a squadron of underwater extraterrestrial spacecraft.
If you can travel that fast underwater, water is just another medium, so their craft can fly underwater just like they can above water. That tells me that these aren't conventional technology. It's nothing earthly made.
What we're dealing with here is very clearly advanced technology. So we have to draw the conclusion that perhaps this is some sort of extraterrestrial technology that we're dealing with. That's what makes this case so compelling. The speed, the movement of the objects, and the rate that they disappeared. It's incredible.
A well-documented case with a ton of witnesses, sketches, Air Force involvement, takes place in 1965, starting over Oklahoma. A wave of saucers, flying saucers, is seen by hundreds over 4 states. And on the first day, it was actually at night, July 31st, 1965, it all starts with a USO. A fisherman at night in his boat on a lake. He observes a saucer-type object with a greenish-white light slowly emerge in front of him out of the lake and then zip off at speed. He was so shocked by this that it's reported he was hospitalized for shock. It really just literally blew his mind. And it was determined he was not on drugs, not drunk, and was an upstanding citizen. And then you have 4 or 5 straight days of multiple sightings of multiple saucers spreading over Kansas, Texas, Oklahoma, and the like. And you can see here the headlines of how the news of the day was covering it. Thousands more see flying saucers over Oklahoma City. Here's a sketch by a witness. And
I mean, that's pretty detailed.
Yes.
There's not much middle ground with something like that.
Yes, this is would be the object that a fisherman claims came out of a lake and then took off into the skies and was then seen in the skies by locals over 4 states. Now, the interesting thing is the Air Force gets involved. And what do we know now in 1965? What was the Air Force doing at this point?
Well, of course, we had Project Blue Book. So they were officially investigating these sightings. The Air Force was coming out, interviewing the witnesses, and very often, sad to say, what they were trying to do with these waves of sighting is debunk them.
Right, yeah. They would try to downplay people's fears, downplay, oh, you didn't see this, what you actually saw was this. And observers, witnesses were actually starting to argue with the Air Force because the Air Force was reporting, no, as it says here, no, you were just seeing a star or Jupiter.
Come on. I mean, do they take people for idiots? People look in the night sky all the time. I know what a star and planet looks like, and I bet the guy who was out fishing knows darned well, too.
But what's funny is further evidence shows this. These totally not UFOs per the Air Force, totally Jupiter or a star per the Air Force, are tracked on radar. They were tracked at altitudes of 6,000 to 9,000 feet.
Not millions and millions of miles away, as in Jupiter.
Or any star, right? So something was 6,000 to 9,000 feet in the air. As you can see, I don't want to dive deeper into Oklahoma, which was made international news, but it blew me away that the catalyst for this wave was indeed a USO, and one that scared a hardy local fisherman almost literally to death. So in this case, we're able to read about the Air Force's involvement, and when you look at the Air Force's Project Blue Book files, you see at least 623 cases of USOs reported by the US Navy. So within Project Blue Book, these 623 cases, I've pulled some selects where Blue Book coordinated with the US Navy in order to investigate the sightings. And I'd like to just bring up a few examples here. August 1950, naval officers aboard a ship see an unidentified elliptical object approach the ship. The speed of the object was estimated to be around 500 miles an hour. The object was described as ovular, egg-shaped, tic-tac shaped. The object's color was described as shiny aluminum color, sparkled in the sunlight, and also as metallic white. The official Project Blue Book conclusion of this, unidentified. August 1954. Off the coast of the Yoranjima Island in the Pacific Ocean, witnesses aboard the SS Dr. Angier witness a 100-foot diameter disc approach the ship from the northeast. It was estimated to be 100 feet accurately because it literally flew over the ship, stopped, and then rose and disappeared into the sky. The witnesses were interviewed by U.S. Air Force Intelligence, Project Blue Book, and the final conclusion, unidentified. So you've got the U.S. Navy seeing these crazy things, coordinating with Project Blue Book, the government's official UFO program, to investigate what they saw, because they don't know. They don't. If they know, it wouldn't have been a report. And it turns out official guidelines, Navy guidelines, were issued. So basically, here it is. Here's the whole procedure of if you see this, report it this way.
And I love this because it's got at the top, of course, picture of missiles, picture of a ship, picture of a submarine, then picture of a UFO with a military aircraft, as if, yeah, that's every bit as real as the other things here.
They drew a flying saucer, and they're telling pilots and Navymen, if you see this, here's how you report it. How to send it, and then to send that communication of that report, of that sighting, to a specific destination. One has to wonder, if you were someone at one of those destinations, receiving these reports, what kind of reports were you getting? What was that like? We spoke to someone who used to be in the Navy who worked at one of these destinations and received a message. Let's cut to that Skype. When did you join the Navy, and how long were you in the Navy?
I joined back in February 1968. I was in there for 4 years. Served in Vietnam in combat action, had a high-level, top-secret crypto level 14 security clearance. Mostly worked at the Naval Communications Station in San Francisco, which was the busiest military hub back then in 1969.
So all communication from all naval ships is kind of coming into where you are?
Yes, on the Pacific side, yeah. On the Atlantic, there's other, but it was much more traffic on the Pacific side. There was a code room when atmospheric conditions are really bad. The only thing that can make it through is primitive communication. It's much slower, Morse code, doot, type of thing. I was a certified high-speed code operator, 25 words per minute. I was monitoring 9 ship-to-shore circuits simultaneously for traffic from the ships. And I took thousands of messages during the years that I worked there. And the one message that came in always left an imprint on the back of my memory.
Which was what?
A ship that was reporting its position off the coast of Alaska said that the crew visually witnessed coming off of port bow a brightly glowing reddish-orange elliptical unidentified object about 70 feet in diameter that merged out of the ocean, shot straight up into space. The ship's radar operator tracked the blips going over 7,000 miles per hour. This was secret classification, priority level, going to the Chief of Naval Operations in Washington, D.C.
What kind of call was it? Was it a distress call? Was it just a, hey, this happened call? What kind of communication was coming from this vessel?
It was a classified secret message that was coming in, through Morse code. I was typing it out on the typewriter. As I'm typing this message out and decoding it in my mind, I'm reading this thing. I can't believe what I'm reading. Yes, I'm decoding it. And I almost thought for a second, I could go over to the Xerox machine and make a copy, but then, you get 10 years in prison. That doesn't work. So, handed it on to the communications watch officer, which then took it to the crypto and then sent it on to Washington.
Okay, So, after this 1969 experience that you had, did you have any other run-ins, experiences? Did you hear tales of other cases after that?
I've done a lot of research since that time. I find out that's not unusual. There's actually thousands of USO reports that coming out of the ocean that date way back.
And that brings us to the big one. Probably the most famous USO case ever. Shag Harbor, Nova Scotia, Canada. Why don't you give me the basics?
Sure. October 4th, 1967, multiple witnesses see essentially an unidentified submerged object. Something comes down, enters the water. Subsequently, some people say they see it floating on the surface. The military is involved. Many witnesses.
Right. And leading up to this story, before this object that people see collide with the harbor off Nova Scotia, there are a few sightings leading up to that. One is an airline pilot who captured the object on radar. He said it was rectangular shaped with a string of lights. You've got a family at the same time sitting on their front porch. This is around 7 or 8 at night. They look up, they see the same exact object as this airline pilot. You've also got down in the water, you've got a boat captain picking up the object on his radar. He saw 4 objects on his radar, 4 different objects. So while some folks saw one solid object, a rectangle, others were picking up perhaps different objects. So this sucker is seen, 4 lights, descending at speed towards the harbor, collides with the harbor. People say they hear it sound like a bomb going off.
Yes, a sort of whistling, whooshing noise as this object or objects descends.
At this point, many people were calling their local radio stations to report, I just saw this. The first person to call to see this with his own eyes and to call authorities, that first phone call was by Laurie Wickens, who we spoke to via Skype. Let's listen to his story. You were a witness at the Shag Harbor event.
Yes, I was the first one to call the RCMP that night. There was 5 of us in the car. We see lights in the sky. We just thought it was an airplane.
And describe for me what you saw.
There was 4 lights. They were in a row, in a line, all level. And after we went a mile or so, as we made a corner and started going up a hill, the light went from going level to a 45-degree angle. And before we made the top of the hill, the light went out of sight for about 3 seconds. We made the top of the hill, there was 1 light in the water. We just thought it was a plane that went down. We went to a phone booth and called the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and reported a plane crash.
One theory is that this is a crash, but I wonder, when you come to think that there was a recovery operation, they searched, expecting to find debris. I mean, people thought initially, one of the theories was, this is a plane crash. They didn't find anything, and that's interesting. It raises the possibility that this was a controlled descent into the water. And indeed, if some of the witnesses saw it floating on the surface, did it actually take off and leave?
What do you think it was?
Don't know. They said something crashed. They say we officially searched for something, but we don't know what it is.
And the official story says we found nothing. Nothing was found. And to me, that's almost as crazy as we found a UFO, because if an object is observed in the air, tracked on radar, its size estimated, it's seen crashing into a harbor, and if gravity works the way it's supposed to work, you would find something in that lake.